I want to start at the point that you were on Mount Everest almost 50 years ago. And I'm wondering, is there any photo evidence that you were there?
No, there's no photograph of me actually on the summit of the mountain. But I took photographs of Tenzing standing on the summit, and I took photographs down all the leading ridges of the mountain to give complete evidence that the team was there. Well, obviously someone had to take the photographs, and I never even thought of taking a photograph of myself, but I can assure you I was there.
But that speaks volumes about you. I wanted to really say to you, in all of these thousands of lectures and media interviews in the last 50 years, has anybody ever questioned that you were on top? Because I've looked through all of these books for weeks, and there's not a picture of you. So you're telling me I'm right. There is no picture of you on Everest.
That's absolutely true. That there's no picture of me on the summit of the mountain.
Because you took the picture of Norgay.
Yeah, the thing was, Tenzing didn't have a camera. And as far as I knew, he may never have taken a photograph in his life. So I just didn't even think of the need for there being a photograph of me. I think that's a little different from the modern day climber who makes good and sure that there's a few pictures of him standing on the summit. The thought really didn't particularly enter my mind. I had a good shot. I took a number of shots of Tenzing with all the flags waving, and then I took those very important shots down all the leading ridges of the mountain, and that satisfied me. I didn't even think about myself.
Well, you knew you were there.
I knew I was there, and someone had to have taken the photograph.
Right.
That was me.
But I say, Sir Edmund, it speaks volumes about you and your approach to life and to climbing that you took a picture of Tenzing Norgay on the top of Mount Everest, but you didn't turn around and say, okay, I was here first, take me. You didn't do that, did you?
I didn't do that.
I think that's great. Did you, remembering back that moment, you had to have some sense that if I step foot on this mountain, it's going to have some measure of fame. I assume you knew that.
No, I didn't really.
You didn't?
I was I was a country boy really, and a little bit innocent perhaps. And when we stood on top, I realized that mountaineers in general would be quite interested in our success. But I really had no idea that the media and the public would find it all that interesting. I was, obviously a little bit naive about it, but I didn't have that great feeling. It wasn't until I was walking out to Kathmandu that mail runners kept coming in with many telegrams and letters and newspaper cuttings and all the rest of it, that I finally realized that the world had taken quite a lot of interest in our success on the mountain. Before that, I really didn't have too much idea about it.
This coincided with the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. Was that at all in Hunt's mind, the leader's mind, or your mind, or was London a million miles away?
I would say it might possibly have been in John Hunt's mind, but it was certainly never in my mind. my feeling was that we still had a long way to go. We still hadn't got to the top. We had to give it everything we'd got. The monsoon was approaching, so time was running short. So I just concentrated on getting up the mountain. And I was almost hardly aware of the fact that it was a similar time to the Queen's coronation.
You came off the mountain and you were rushed off to London and you were knighted by the Queen. Probably something beyond your wildest imagination. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think it would, but on the other hand, I think I had perhaps quite an advantage. Being a New Zealander, you know, meeting all these lords and dukes and princes and all the rest of it was quite good fun, I thought. I wasn't by any means overwhelmed by it. I mean, I was only a beekeeper from New Zealand, but what the heck. And the occasion in Buckingham Palace when the Queen knighted me, well, it was an important occasion, obviously, but in a way it was a fun occasion to me. It was obviously a new experience, and I thought it was great, but I wasn't overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, I got it, but I can see it being fun, but not only did you have the opportunity to meet the royals, but to meet a lot of other interesting people, explorers probably, maybe Sir Peter Scott, I don't know. But there must have been other people at receptions and things that were also interesting to you, were there not?
Oh yes, I had, over the years, I had the opportunity to meet a vast variety of famous explorers, famous people, and I enjoyed meeting them, enjoyed listening to them. I'm a pretty good listener, actually, and in general, I didn't do much talking. I let them do the talking, and I just tended to absorb it. But I got a lot of pleasure out of that.
Yes, I worked for a president of the United States named Lyndon B. Johnson, and he used to tell us, you know, folks, you don't learn anything when you're talking. I've never forgotten that. Anyway, here I'm talking. So you went off. Now, you have had countless honors besides being knighted. You're on the $5 bill in New Zealand. You're a nice picture. All over the world, India and various places, you've been honored. How do you, not to negate anything that anybody has done, but how do you sort of evaluate, what would you put your finger on as being maybe the best?
Well, I've always tried to discount the sort of attitude by the media that I was a heroic figure. I don't believe I was a heroic figure at all. I was just a keen mountaineer. I was in the right place at the right time, and I think probably I did a pretty good job on Mount Everest. But I've never regarded myself as an exceptional figure in any way at all.
Well, let's go back to Everest. You've been out, you've done all of the stuff, but anyway, let's go back to that climb. It seems to me, from what I've read in recent years and the history and going back to Mallory in the 20s and all that, and maybe he was the first example. It seems to me from your own climb, your own successful climb, and many others, that the real danger of Everest is coming off of it. Because you guys ran into a very tough time, did you not, as you were descending?
Yeah, I think on any difficult mountain or big mountain, the descent of the mountain is certainly just as important as the ascent. For one thing, you're a little bit more tired. You can't, it's not quite so easy to place your feet carefully. And, you know, you can make mistakes. So descending a big mountain has to be treated with the greatest of respect.
Give us some more about what you need to do when you come off. Your oxygen is obviously low. And
well, you know, I know that young people don't particularly like advice, so I don't hand out too much unless it's actually been asked for. But when young people do ask me what should I do? I'm a young person and I want to climb big mountains, I'm keen and strong and all the rest of it. What do you advise? And I'm inclined to say to them, well, take advantage of the experience of older, more experienced people. You may not like doing this, but they have been through the mill. They have learned the skills. They've learned how to overcome the problems. They know the answers to many of the difficulties. So it's worthwhile for you to talk to them, to listen to them, to absorb all their information. Don't try to start from the beginning again. Use all their information, and when you've done that, then go off and do your own thing.
Yeah, there's not much reason, not much gained actually, if for an individual to climb Everest or K2 or whatever and die on the way down. It's a great waste.
Oh, I agree. On any mountain, it's a two-way thing, really. You know, one part is getting up to the top, and which is quite important. But the second part, which is equally important, is getting safely to the bottom again. So I always encourage young people to keep in mind that the descent of the mountain may well be one of their major challenges.
Would you talk a little bit about your descent from Everest?
Well, on the descent, we came down what is now called the Hillary Step, the 40-foot drop on the ridge, and back to the south summit. And then we sort of plunged down the very long, steep snow slope to our camp at about 27,500 feet. And our tent was still there, and we crawled inside and we brewed up a cup of tea, and then we packed up all our gear and headed back down the southeast ridge. As we came down the southeast ridge, there's a couloir, a gully that runs up onto the ridge, and the wind that had been blowing had made the snow very firm. So I had to cut steps down into the gully until finally the conditions got much softer and we were able to plunge down the bottom part onto the South Col. And then coming up to meet us from our camp on the Col was my very good friend and fellow New Zealander, George Lowe. And George, we sort of came together at the bottom of the couloir, and I remember George saying to me, "How did it go, Ed?" And then I said my famous words, "Well, George, we knocked the bastard off." You know, it rather surprises me that I made that statement because I didn't use strong language at all in those days, but just on that occasion it seemed the right thing to say. So George had a thermos flask of, I think it was tomato soup, and he gave Tenzing and me a good swig of that, which we enjoyed, and then we returned back to our tents.
There was no problem with oxygen coming down?
No problem.
With oxygen depletion?
No, we ran out of oxygen about halfway down, but we just moved slowly down without just being very careful and without too much trouble. And we didn't feel any severe effects of the lack of oxygen.
And you had fairly good weather, I guess.
Well, when we actually first got to the South Col, it was very windy and very unpleasant weather. And we had hoped to head off up the mountain the next day. But it blew furiously all night, and next day was very unpleasant indeed. So we had to spend another night on the South Col. And,
just the two of you?
Yeah, but there were various other members of the party around.
Yeah.
So we all spent an extra night on the South Col. But by next morning, the weather had improved considerably. And then we started off up the mountain to establish our highest camp.
And?
Nowadays, of course, they don't have a high camp on Mount Everest. All the expeditions climb from their camp on the South Col. But we had planned to put in a small high camp. We had 3 extra members to support us up to the high camp. There was George Lowe and Alf Gregory and one of our very good Sherpas. And they dumped all the gear there and we dumped our gear, and then they headed back down to the South Col. And Tenzing and I put up our tent and crawled inside. And all that night it blew quite strongly. There were sort of severe gusts of wind. We could hear them coming around the mountainside, sort of with a woof and a bang. And we didn't sleep a great deal at all that night. But in the morning, early morning, about 4:30 I think it was, I looked out the door and the weather had obviously cleared quite a bit. And so we knew we could get ready and start up the mountain. That's what we did.
Okay. And were there any moments of doubt or danger? Or?
Well, you know, when we were halfway up the long, steep slope towards the south summit, there was a lot of very soft snow. And we'd sometimes take one step forward and then slide back through a couple of steps. And I was a little bit concerned about possible avalanche danger. And I remember turning to Tenzing and saying to him, "What do you think of it, Tenzing?" And he said, well, he didn't like it very much. And I said, will we carry on? And he thought for a moment and said, "Just as you like." Well, that was a good enough reason, so we carried on. And the conditions did improve, got a bit firmer, and we duly reached the south summit.
Okay, you go on. You've reached the south summit.
And then from the south summit, we looked along the long, narrow summit ridge, which looked quite impressive to us.
Hard.
I think lower down we would have regarded it as a good alpine ridge. But up here at close to 29,000 feet, it looked quite demanding. And there was it was corniced, it was overhanging with ice on the right-hand side. So we knew we couldn't keep on the crest of the ridge. we'd have to keep down a bit on the left-hand side above the great rock face that dropped thousands of feet down to the valley. So I just cut steps. You know, in those days we were great step cutters. Nowadays nobody cuts steps. They have much better equipment and so on. But I just cut steps along the snow on the side of the ridge. Tenzing followed along behind. We reached this...
You were roped up?
We were roped up, and in places we moved one at a time, actually. And then we reached this step. Then we reached this step, which is now called the Hillary Step. And I looked at it and I thought, you know, it looked pretty demanding to get up it. But on the right-hand side, stuck against the rock, was this ice cornice, which had broken away a bit from the rock. So there was sort of a narrow gap between the ice and the rock. And I decided, I didn't know whether the cornice would stay in place, but I decided to crawl inside that crack, and I had my back against the ice and what handholds I could find on the rock, and I scrambled my way up and reached the top and hauled myself out. That, you know, was the first time that I was absolutely confident that we were going to get to the top. Before that, it had all been really a big gamble. We were going to give it everything we had, but, you know, there was no surety about being successful. But now I knew we were going to get to the top.
So you were doing a chimney?
I did a chimney, yeah.
That was a chimney. The Hillary Step became a chimney.
It became a chimney.
Is it still a chimney?
Well, it varies, you know, according to the snow conditions and so on.
Could be anything.
Could be anything.
But since you made it, it's inspired everybody else to. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, lots and lots of people have been up it now.
Yeah.
But nowadays, of course, they have usually 3 sets of fixed ropes hanging down the Hillary Step. So it's not quite like what it was in our day.
3 sets of fixed ropes?
Yeah.
No elevator?
No elevators that I know of. But that'll be next.
Well, I want to go back to your previous trips over there. And I was wondering if perhaps your physical danger, threat to your life, may not have been as you were doing these scouting trips in the previous year or two, where I've read that you were falling into crevasses left and right. That must have been a little hairy.
Yeah, it was hairy, but one thing that George Lowe and myself, we were very experienced in snow and ice climbing, in crevasses and ice walls and all the rest of it. We'd trained, you know, very extensively in the New Zealand Alps, where we have tons of crevasses and ice walls. So we were pretty good in handling snow and ice conditions. And we had the technique to deal with areas of bad crevassing. Sure, I fell down quite a few crevasses, but always I would have someone like George on the other end of the rope. I was pretty expert at bridging as I fell down a crevasse, at bridging it, throwing my crampons out against one wall and my pack against the other, and so stopping myself from crashing to the bottom.
Well, since I've never done any bridging, tell us how, okay, you've fallen down, you've got your crampons against the other wall, you've got your pack against the back. Now, how do you get up?
Well, I always made sure I held onto my ice axe, because that was the clue to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would reach forward on the other side of the crevasse and cut a step in the ice, and then cut a step behind me, and then using my ice axe jammed into the wall, I'd swing across until I had 1 foot on one side of the crevasse and 1 foot on the other.
And even if you were not roped up with someone, you could.
Well, I was nearly always roped up.
But I mean, even if you weren't, you could make it up, could you not?
I was determined to make it up, yes.
Yeah.
But
that's
usually I had someone on the rope, and sometimes it might be a couple of Sherpas who weren't quite as good at reacting, perhaps, as George Lowe would have been. But I would bridge the crevasse, and then a few seconds later the rope would come tight, and then I would cut steps on either side and make my way up to the top.
Let's talk gear, because this is a nice segue. I talk to the Washburns. I usually talk gear to everybody, especially some of the old timers. And it was interesting what the Washburns told me about their gear. So tell me about your gear in 1953, 1, 2, 3. Let's see. You did 2 scouting trips to Everest, or 1?
Well, we did 2 really. We did the first reconnaissance.
Yeah.
But then we came
Was
back
that
the following
51?
year when the Swiss were attempting the mountain.
Right. And in 52?
In 52.
Yeah.
And then we back 53 to climb it.
52 was when you knew you could do it. Or it could be done.
No, we didn't know in 52.
You didn't?
53 was when we knew we could do it.
Oh, okay. you didn't find
Our
out.
equipment, you know, was very different from modern equipment. We were very competent users of the ice axe in cutting steps. And but we had down clothing, which was, you know, kept us reasonably warm. But we had 10-point crampons, but no front point crampons. And they were rather short little crampons on our sort of double layer boots, which were reasonably warm, but weren't ideal for climbing because they were rather soft and sloppy. Nowadays, things are so different. I mean, the modern climber has curvers, he has ice axes, he has front point crampons, his rope techniques are often a good deal better than ours were. We just had very light nylon ropes. They were in the early days, really. And but we could still use them pretty competently, you know, with the equipment we had.
They did stretch, didn't they?
They did the trick.
But they weren't made for climbing.
They really weren't made for climbing, and I would say that the modern equipment, like my son has used on Everest a couple of times, is much more sophisticated. It enables the modern climber to move more quickly. I don't think the modern climber was any stronger, or certainly no more motivated than we were. But they do have the equipment, and they know how to use it.
Not that it matters, but the front pointing crampons would have been a little help on the Hillary step, would they not?
Well, perhaps they would. And going up between the ice and the rock, there wouldn't have been any use on the rock face there. But the front point crampons are a great advantage on snow and ice climbing.
Now, the ice axes were
Long
wooden handle. And did they have a sling at the end?
We didn't have slings, no.
Yeah, no. So if something happened and it went, it went.
Well, we just made good and sure that it didn't go.
Didn't go, right. You come back to this couloir when you guys were coming down. Were you doing the glissade, or were you just walking your way down? I didn't quite get that. You said when the snow got softer, you went down faster.
Well, when the snow got softer coming down, we were able to, well, to an extent, glissade down the upper part of the mountain. But when we got down onto the southeast ridge again, we had to make our way down. There was some rock and some snow, and then down to the great big couloir down to the South Col. As I mentioned, that was had been hardened up by the strong winds, and so I just had to set to work and cut steps with my ice axe for about halfway down, and then the conditions got softer, and Tenzing and I were almost able to run down the lower part of the couloir. We were still roped up. Yeah, we were roped up the whole time.
Yep.
And that's one of the big differences, of course, with modern climbers. A great deal of climbing nowadays is done unroped. But we roped up, and we protected each other all the time, really.
Okay, more on equipment. Now, you come from a land here that is famous for wool. What did you have wool? Any wool clothing? Sort of describe the. I guess I didn't. I was thinking back because I was in Korea in the war with the Marines at that time. So you had down jackets, thick.
Yeah, we did.
And pants.
We had we had woolen singlets. We had heavy woolen shirts, and then we'd have a woolen sweater, and then on top of that we would have a thick down jacket and down pants, and then right on the outside we'd have windproof jacket and windproof pants. So we had plenty of layers of stuff.
Took you a while to get dressed.
Took a little while to get dressed, but it was worth it once it was all on.
And what about gloves?
Well, we had 3 pairs of gloves. The first was a pair of silk gloves, and then we had woolen mitts, and then finally a pair of windproof gloves. The silk gloves were very handy when I was on the summit and had to take the photographs. I took off the windproof and woolen mitts, and I got sufficient protection from the silk gloves to be able to operate my camera and take all the photographs. And then I pulled everything back on again.
Do you know what the temperature was when you're on the summit of Everest?
Well, I didn't have a thermometer up there. I think we estimated it was minus 16 to minus 20 Celsius. It was cold, yeah.
Do you have a lot of wind?
There were gusts of wind on top. I remember when I took off my oxygen equipment on the top to take all the photographs, and the wind was blowing across from the west, and it was full of little bits of ice, and all the ice sort of prickled against my face. So I was very much aware of the wind and of the ice that was carrying through it. And of course we knew it'd be something like that because when you look at Everest from down below, you can usually see that long plume of wind-blown snow and ice streaming from the summit. And we certainly had that too.
How long did you stay?
We only stayed there 15 minutes.
Did you get the hell out, huh?
Yeah, we were very much aware of that our oxygen was getting lower and that we wanted to get safely down the mountain.
Okay, backing up to you're a country boy. You just said that, so I could say that. And you had done your climbing down here in the New Zealand Alps. And but I'm interested in how you are way over here, and Hunt. Or I think there was a previous leader that backed out. Is that
Yeah, Eric Shipton had been
Shipton backed
our
out?
first leader. He was a wonderful
famous
explorer,
Yeah.
really.
Mhm. And so Shipton backed out, and Hunt stepped in. Now I've always wondered what gave someone in the Army climbing experience especially to take on something like Everest.
Well, John Hunt actually was a very experienced mountaineer. He had climbed in the Himalayas before, and so he knew what he was doing, actually. He was a very good organizer, and you know, I was a little bit worried about having an army officer as leader of the expedition, being a somewhat independent type myself. But John Hunt was absolutely marvellous. He really knew, I would have said, how to handle us. He never issued an order or anything like that. It was always discussion and suggestions, and no, he was good. He proved to be a very good expedition leader.
But he did choose the people who went on the teams.
Yeah, the final actual discussion was after we had all our equipment up on the South Col, and then we were ready to put in the big push towards the summit. And John Hunt and Charles Evans, who was sort of our deputy leader, and myself, John Hunt got us into his tent, and he'd worked out a sort of a plan for everybody on the mountain. And he discussed it with Charles Evans and myself. Charles Evans had been given the job of really what they call the first attempt, which was essentially to reach the South Summit. And then he'd given Tenzing and myself a job of trying to get to the top. Well, obviously, Charles Evans and I agreed wholeheartedly with that. We thought it was a pretty good idea. And then we went through all the other quite important jobs up the mountain where good climbers would need to be. And then John called everybody in and announced all these things. And generally speaking, everybody was pretty satisfied with the jobs they were given.
And that's how it was decided.
That's how it was decided. You know, it's a bit different nowadays. People tend to be, I think, much more prima donnas, perhaps. And but we had a leader, and although we all, no doubt, wished to reach the summit, we were prepared to discuss what we should do, and then John made the final decision, and we followed that.
But I got a little digressed there, which was wonderful. But to come back to your gear, tell me about your boots.
Well, our boots were nothing like the boots that we have nowadays. They were specially made for us. They were very soft, vapor barrier with a sort of very light layer inside, and then I don't know what the filling was, but there was a filling in between, and then the outside, and then very light soles on the boots, rubber soles, and but they did the job, but they were not ideal for technical climbing. The main thing about them was that they kept us reasonably warm.
Sir Edmund, what sort of things could you think about that these young people might stick in their kit when they go climbing big expedition, or maybe not so big. Lots of these young people go out solo in very isolated places and so forth. Are there any things that you can think of that maybe people don't think about today that were pretty good stuff then? I mean, besides the dried food and all that.
Yeah, well, in our day, of course, we just used the equipment that was available. In a way, we were on a bridge between, you know, the really old equipment, the early days on Everest. They just had tweed jackets and pants and so on, and windproofs. It was pretty primitive. Well, we'd gone a little bit beyond that stage, but we hadn't reached the sort of stage that mountaineers use nowadays. And you know, my son has piles of very sophisticated equipment all over his house and all over my house and everywhere else. Stuff that we simply didn't have. But we had adequate equipment for what we wanted to do. And we knew how to use it. I mean, although our ice axes were long and perhaps rather primitive, we could use them very effectively. We were good step cutters, and also even with our limited crampons, we were able to use them reasonably effectively. We could get through crevasse country.
Without aluminum ladders?
Without aluminum ladders. You know, nowadays there's thousands of meters of fixed rope across the ice fall and up the Lhotse face. We didn't have that sort of thing at all. We just established a route in odd places. We would put a fixed rope. But in general, we had to pioneer the routes we followed. And perhaps that was the major difference. We had to establish our own route. We had to overcome the problems. We weren't following in other people's footprints. We had to do it ourselves.
What happens if the high-tech gear fails? What's the fault?
Well, the high-tech gear is pretty good these days.
Not going to fail?
On the whole, it doesn't fail, no.
Okay. Well, okay, at this point I want to go back to where I usually start with these interviews, and that's how it all started with you. Now, you grew up in a town, and I can't even pronounce it. Pronounce it for me, will you?
Yeah, I was born here in Auckland,
Yeah.
but for the first 12 or 13 years, I lived in the little town of Tuakau.
Tuakau. Yeah.
Which was a very small country town 40 miles south of Auckland. And my father was the editor of the country newspaper called the Tuakau District News. You know, it wasn't exactly the New York Times or anything of that nature, but it was quite important in the community. And then he took up beekeeping as a hobby. And finally he had so many hives of bees that he decided to become a commercial beekeeper. And he had 1,600 hives of bees, which in those days was quite a lot of bees. And I went to high school in Auckland, and I spent a couple of years at university, but I was a very poor student. So in the end, I ended up working for my father in the beekeeping.
Which university?
The University of Auckland.
Your father was a tough nut, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He had very rigid views, and if you didn't toe the line, when I was young, he used to take me over to the woodshed and give me a good beating, which people were more inclined to do in those days, I guess.
Character
But
building?
you know, one characteristic I always remember, and I don't know whether it's with pride or disgrace really, I never ever, he didn't matter how many times he beat me, I never ever admitted I was wrong. Now I'm sure I quite often was, but I would never admit it. I always remember he had a very nice grapevine along the side of the house, and the grapes were all just getting nice and ripe. And there was one bunch of grapes that really looked terrific. And my father came out one day and found that this bunch of grapes had disappeared. Well, he automatically suspected me, and he took me over to the woodshed, and so the whole business started. He wanted me to admit that I had eaten these grapes. Well, I just wouldn't do it. So he thumped me and thumped me and thumped me, but I never admitted now I have no idea whether I did or not. Probably I did, I guess, pick the grapes, but I would never admit it.
Now, you were how much older? You were older than Rex or younger than Rex?
Oh, I was younger.
Younger than Rex?
Rex was a year younger, and I had a sister, June, who's 2 years older.
Mm-hmm. But this discipline, this tough lives. Now you refer to 1,600 beehives as nothing, but at 1,600 beehives, hell of a lot of bees, a lot of hives rather, and that was some work.
Well, we worked very hard indeed, but I enjoyed it. My brother also was working, and we really enjoyed it. Beekeeping is a tremendous gamble at times. You've got to have the right weather in order for the bees to go and get the nectar. You can have a lousy season with very little production, or you can have a good season and get 40 tons of honey. So one year you're up and the next year you're down.
Well, we're not out of your childhood yet, but I want to throw in a question I did have. After you did Everest and the word went out that this beekeeper from New Zealand had climbed the highest mountain in the world, did it ever occur to you how funny that was to the rest of us?
No, I always remember that when we were walking out from Mount Everest and we were getting all these mail runners coming in to meet us, and a mail runner came in with a whole lot of letters, and there was a letter for me, and it was addressed to Sir Edmund Hillary. And I thought, oh, big joke, and all the rest of it. But George Lowe, who was a bit smarter than me, he realised that it wasn't a joke and that the Queen had made me a knight. Well, my first thought was, well, I'm not really suitable material for a knight. When I'm back home at the bees, I'll have to buy myself a new pair of coveralls so I look a bit more respectable. That was the thought that entered my mind. It wasn't even the honour or anything. It was just I'd need a new pair of coveralls.
Sir Edmund, you are a navigator in the Air Force. You're down on the South Island, and you see a mountain over there. You think you should be on top of it, and away you went.
Yeah, well, I was only training, to be a navigator at that stage. And it was in the winter time in the Marlborough area of the South Island. And peeping over the top of the surrounding hills, I could see a pretty impressive mountain covered in snow. And I knew it was called Mount Tapoinuku. And so I decided that would be a pretty good mountain to climb. However, I wasn't able to persuade any of my companions to come with me. I'd climbed a lot of the mountains around that area, smaller ones, and some of them had come along. And my best friend came along once, and when we got back to camp, he said, "Well, Ed, that was great fun, but I'm not going again." So obviously it had been a little bit tougher than he expected. Anyway, I finally organised things. I got a 3-day leave, and there was a friend there who had a motorbike, and he took me over the intervening hills into the valley, and then he wasn't a very good motorbike driver, and he tipped us out on the shingle, and I decided to walk from then on. So I walked up this valley for hour after hour, and then finally up a side stream at the foot of this mountain, and finally spent the night in a shepherd's hut, way up in this little cold water stream. And there was snow around down at this level. Well, I didn't sleep very much. There were a lot of mice in the hut, and I'd sort of wake up with a mouse sitting on my head, which put me off a little bit, I must admit. But anyway, early in the morning, I had a bite to eat, and then I started up this great long ridge towards the upper part of the mountain. And the snow was quite heavy going, but I was pretty fit in those days. And finally, after overcoming quite a few problems and difficulties on the ridge, I got high on the mountain and the clouds swept in and it started snowing again. Well, I kept going and I kept going until finally there was nowhere else to go, and I realised I was on top of Mount Tapoinuku. And so then I just turned around and started down again. And once again I was very careful on the descent because it was quite icy in places. And but I couldn't see. It got dark and I couldn't see where the hut would be. But then, I stumbled over a rock, which I remembered stumbling over on the way up. So I thought, this is it, this is where I get off. So I went down the side of the ridge, down into the river, and sure enough, there was the hut. So I spent only about 4 hours in bed, I guess. Then I got up very early in the morning and headed down the river and out to the road, and started down the road which led in the end back towards my camp. But when the sun came out then, so I hadn't eaten anything for a long time, so I cooked myself up a good meal. I had bacon and eggs and all sorts of things. And then I carried on down, and I walked, I suppose, for 20 miles. And there was no traffic at all. This was a very lonely area. But finally, an old truck came back down the valley, and the old farmer stopped and said, "How'd it go?" And I said, "Oh, I got to the top." And he said, well, you know, everybody in the valley thought you would be dead by this time. And I said, could you give me a lift? And he said, sure. So I got in and we drove the next 40 or 50 mile back to my camp. But that was my first big challenge in the mountains. And I had managed to get to the top, and it had been pretty hard work. But I felt a great sense of satisfaction about it.
Was it the first ascent?
It was I think my ascent was the first, certainly the first solo winter ascent of Mount Tapainuku.
What kind of gear did you have?
Well, I had very primitive gear. I just had my Air Force clothing and sweaters, and
No axe?
I had an ice axe. I brought it down with me, and but I wasn't very well equipped at all. But I was very fit and pretty strong then, and so I managed to get to the top.
When I read this recently, again, it was my impression, you've already said it, this sort of was a great confidence builder for you, was it not?
Yes, it was. I often found it difficult to get companions to go on trips. So I did a great deal of solo climbing. And in those days anyway, solo climbing was regarded as quite well, not only difficult, but a dangerous procedure. If something happened to you, there'd be nobody to help you. But I did a lot of solo climbing, and I think it did build up my confidence in myself, that I was able to carry on my own, and I climbed quite a few mountains like that.
So you gained a lot of confidence on your solo climbs. You got out of the Air Force. And how was it that Shipton and or Hunt found out about you and George Lowe down here?
Well, I did, after the war, I did a lot of climbing. And my brother and I had pretty much taken over the bee business from my father. So I had a little bit more time to go to the mountains. And finally, four of us decided we'd done some pretty good new ascents in New Zealand, and we were very experienced climbers. And we decided we would like to go to the Himalayas. So we organised things. It was a real shoestring expedition, but we went to the Gawal Himalayas, which is the Indian part of the Himalayas. And we were pretty successful.
You and George?
Me and George and Earl Ridderford and one other member. And we climbed, made the first ascent of 6 mountains over, from 21 to 23,000 feet. So we did pretty well. And this information was, they heard about it in the UK, and Eric Shipton had got permission to take a reconnaissance to the south side of Mount Everest, just to have a look and see whether it was possible to climb it then. And he'd organised a team from the UK, but they were mostly rock climbers. And he knew there'd be a lot of snow and ice climbing. So he invited 2 of us, sent us a message, invited 2 of our 4-man team to join up with him. So we chased after him into Nepal in the monsoon season, fording rivers and dashing up hills, going hell for leather. And we finally caught up to him. And he had his team of 4, and then the two of us. And so the six of us went up to Everest Base Camp, and we were really the first to have a good look into the up the icefall and into the western combe, and the first to realise that potentially there might be a route to the summit of the mountain up that side.
What happened with Shipton?
Well, Eric Shipton really was a wonderful explorer, but he wasn't really perhaps, I mean, I had a great admiration for him, but I wouldn't have said he was the ideal leader of a big expedition, because he worried too much about all the members of the expedition and about the Sherpas and so on. He really preferred exploring remote areas and difficult places and so on, and wasn't quite as interested in just attempting a big expedition on a big mountain. So the organising committee decided, much to our horror I might say, to replace him and ask John Hunt to be a leader. We didn't like that at all, because we had a great respect for Eric. But as it turned out, John Hunt was a very good leader and did a very good job for us.
So you and Hunt were the only two people knighted from that group?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, John Hunt was expedition leader, and myself as having reached the summit. Tenzing was also there, and he didn't get a knighthood because they said it was because in India they didn't permit people to get foreign knighthoods.
Right.
So he received the George Medal, which was the highest decoration for courage and so on in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've always felt they should have given Tenzing a title too, and I know that it would have been accepted by the people of India, and they would have greatly admired him for it. But he did get a very important decoration.
Well, of course, in America, this is accorded to people, but they hang it on the wall or something, because we don't refer to them as sir or whatever. So,
yes, but we found, and I've found over the years, that Americans in general really quite like dealing with people who have a title.
Yeah.
Yeah. They give you a very warm welcome, and
yes, they do. I guess the person I would know, I was had the good fortune to head up the public relations worldwide for a fundraiser for the World Wildlife Fund, and that was when Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands was the head of the WWF. So we kicked this off at Whitehall Palace, and Prince Philip came. Like you, he, and like I'd had a lot of experience working for and around presidents in the United States and all the Secret Service and so forth. Prince Philip came, I think, maybe with one aide who wandered off to the bar or something, and was quite friendly to everyone. Sir Peter Scott, the son.
Right, I knew him very well.
Yeah. Margot Fontaine, a ballerina who was given the equivalent of the knighthood, and of course she worked a lot in London, but it wasn't used back in America. So, but I headed up the PR and lobbying project for the Concorde to get the landing rights in America. So one of our guys named Deming who headed, who was the British guy in London, was knighted at some point later. He headed the industrial development effort for UK as well. So, and he was, wonderful, and others that I've known over the years. And I think it is something we value very much. I mean, even with McCartney and Elton John, the musicians. I love musicians, and I think we recognize, generally speaking, I'm not sure about some of the press lords, if they if they deserve it. But anyway, okay. So, but could you have done the summit in '53 without these advanced trips?
Without the
advanced trips?
Because we wouldn't have attempted to do it in '53. I mean, we had to reconnoitre the mountain. In fact, when we were there in '51 on the Everest reconnaissance, Eric Shipton, who'd climbed high on the mountain on the Tibetan side, he was pretty sure that it wouldn't be possible to climb it from the Nepalese side. And his attitude was, let's go and have a look, Ed, and we'll head off and explore some of these great mountains over to the east here. So we went in, and then he and I climbed up a big ridge of Pumari, quite a big steep ridge there, and we could look right into the onto the icefall and into the western cone. And then we suddenly realized that maybe there was a possible route. If we could get up the icefall, if we could get up the Lhotse face onto the South Col, it might be possible to reach the summit. And that was really the first time that anybody had ever felt that a route was possible from that side of the mountain. And of course that was the route that we went up the icefall. We hadn't the equipment to go beyond there. But the Swiss put in 2 expeditions, and
which failed?
They both failed, yeah, but they, in the first one, they got to 28,000.
They got to the south?
No, not to the south summit.
They didn't get to the south summit?
No. But they got high on the mountain. Mm-hmm. But then they really failed on the 2 expeditions. They were a very strong party. And then it was our turn.
Sir Edmund, there's something I don't know. Who's left from that group?
Well, we still have about half the team, I think, is left. There's quite a few of them are dead.
Is George still alive?
George is alive, yeah.
And here?
Well, he has a house in England and a house in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. So he spends time in both of them.
Mm-hmm. And Hunt?
No, Hunt died a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Tom Bodillon died many years ago in a mountaineering accident. Wolf Noyce died many years ago in a mountaineering accident. Charles Evans died a few years ago. Our cameraman he was filming in Abyssinia, I think it was, and he got shot by someone, and he duly died. And so there's only about half, maybe half us left.
Sir Edmund, you've spent so many years since you climbed the mountain in 1953 working for the Sherpas. There are several foundations. Tell us a little bit about what your goals were and what's happened.
Well, I built up a great respect and affection for the Sherpas. worked for us on the mountains. They were tough and hardy people, and the thing that I really liked was they had an extremely good sense of humour. So, you know, the combination of hard work and a sense of humour is pretty hard to resist. But they, of course, completely lacked in things that we take for granted. They certainly didn't have any medical help, and they didn't have any schools, so their kids didn't have any schooling. And finally, I asked a group of the shepherds that if there was something we could do for them, what it would be. And they all agreed that initially what they would like would be a school in the quite large village of Kumjung, from which you can, you know, actually see Mount Everest. And so I organised, in the US, I organised some funds, and we obtained a building, we got it into Kumjung and built a school, and then we organised a Sherpa teacher, who was a well-qualified teacher, and that started it. Well, now the Kumjung school has 400 students. It's also a high school, and we have 27 other schools all around this area. And we have 2 hospitals and a dozen medical clinics, and we built bridges over wild rivers and even built a couple of airfields. So we've been very active over the last 40 years.
And what do you see as the future for people carrying on this work beyond?
Well, I don't really quite know, because, you know, when I kicked the bucket when, after all, I'm 83 now, I do have, of course, friends on our various foundations, but I think I'm the one that probably has the greatest ability to fundraise for these activities, and I really don't quite know what will happen. We are planning another 10 years. We've built up some reserve funds, we've got some extra assistance, and we think that we can certainly keep things going for another 10 years. What happens after that? Well, they'll just have to try and do something for themselves, I guess.
Well, hopefully there will be other people who, as in many cases happened with Mother Teresa or others, that will be willing to pick up on that.
Well, we certainly hope so.
And to see that those things happen, because you've brought world attention to this through your work. So you've laid the groundwork, and I would be fairly optimistic that this will not discontinue.
No, well, we certainly hope that someone or some people will feel that the work is worthwhile, and they'll carry on. But we are just thinking a few years ahead now, and ultimately a further 10 years.
Okay, let's skip around a little bit. What about the Antarctica trip? Was that a...
Well, that was great fun, actually. We established a base down on Ross Island, and they called our base Scott Base. And then we wintered over. I had 23 in my party wintering over, and so you know, we had that long period of darkness that you get in the polar regions. But it was a very busy time. We never had time to feel sorry for ourselves or really to feel lonely. I mean, we had so much to do. And then in the spring, we did these exploratory trips into many of the Antarctic areas that nobody had been in before. And I took a group. I took a group of 5 of us with farm tractors, and we drove up onto the polar plateau, and then drove all the way to the South Pole, which was the first time anybody had taken vehicles to the South Pole. That was a big challenge. You know, the crevasses, once again, were a rather frightening problem. But we got there anyway, that was the main thing.
What were those John Deeres? What was the make of the tractor?
No, they were Massey Ferguson.
Massey Ferguson, yes. I couldn't remember. One of the unusual things about our country is that they set out where all of these tractors, farm equipment, had their own color, you know.
Yeah, right.
International Harvester was red, and JIK was gray, and bulldozer. I mean, the bulldozers are yellow, and Massey Ferguson had its own color. I don't know what it was. John Deere was green and yellow.
Yeah, they were red. Yeah.
So these were just regular farm tractors, and you made
They're regular farm tractors, but they had an endless belt that went over the wheels, and that enabled us to travel in softer snow. They weren't by any means ideal snow vehicles, but they were all we had, and they did the job.
Did they have covers? Cabs?
No, we had
cabs, or you're just...
It was all open up top.
Oh, open.
Yeah. So we had to be fairly well equipped. A lot of the time, the temperatures were minus 30 Celsius, even up to minus 40 Celsius, which is the same as minus 40 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So there were some pretty cold temperatures.
All the time.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of, that you felt that was a very fun...
Well, you know, it was a big challenge. It was a great challenge, and we were frightened to death at times. But no, it was, we also felt, you know, a great satisfaction in being able to do it.
Well, speaking of frightened to death, not necessarily frightened to death, but Sir Edmund, has there ever been a time when you're going up Everest or whatever, when you stopped, you're breathing hard, and you look around and you say, "What the hell am I doing up here?"
I've had that feeling on quite a few occasions, really. You know, I've sort of said to myself, why I should be back home lying on the beach, sunbathing. What the heck am I doing up here? But you know, you enjoy that challenge, and so you keep going.
Yeah, that passes and you keep going. Okay, let's talk about the what's the super highway traffic up to Everest these days, and all the trash is being left and so forth. Is there an answer to that?
Well, I think, you know, expeditions are, I think, taking a little bit more trouble now to not leave as much trash around the place as they did before. They've still a long way to go, but I think it's better than it was 10 or 20 years ago.
And it will be left there, or will it be taken out?
It will be left there, yeah. And of course the mountain is just covered with dead bodies, and there have been 160 people who have died on Mount Everest ever since 1931, when the first expedition. So it's still a dangerous place.
You were not, as I recall, having read somewhere, altogether thrilled about the expedition to go find Mallory.
No, I felt when they did find Mallory, they took all the photographs of him, and these were shown or sold to magazines and newspapers all around the world. And Mallory had been a heroic figure to me. And to see these pitiful shots, really, of him with his broken leg, and you know, he'd been dead for years and years, I felt that it was a terrible thing to people to make money out of searching for his body and selling the photographs. I don't know why they hadn't left us. He was a brave man. Why didn't they leave him in peace?
I interviewed that guy who found him at that meeting in D.C. in '99, and he came in and he sat down, and I didn't know much about it, to tell you the truth. And again, you know, I just have grab who's available and try to convince them to tear themselves away from the meetings or their buddies and come talk to me for a while. And so he said, when he sat down in front of the camera, he said, I don't want to talk about the Mallory. I want to talk about the American Alpine Club. I said, fine. Let's talk about the American Alpine Club and where it's going and so forth. So that's what we did talk about. We didn't talk about the Mallory thing, and I don't know, I never saw any pictures, and I don't really know much about it. But there's somebody I think is determined to go up and find the damn camera, you know, and so it never ends.
It never ends, no. And you know, the funny part about it is that well, when you're mountaineering, there are two parts of the expedition, really. One is getting to the top, and the other, equally important, is getting safely to the bottom. Well, Mallory, of course, may have got to the top, and he may not have. We don't know, and maybe we'll never know. But he sure as hell never got to the bottom again.
And he sure as hell was a great climber, wasn't
he? Yeah, he was the inspiration of all the Everest expeditions. He was a very good climber and a very determined person. I admired him, actually, but I just felt he should have been left in peace.
It's really kind of interesting how great climbers emerge from beekeeping farm. He was a school teacher.
Right.
He wasn't a rich person. He was a school teacher, had a family. Or else there wouldn't be George Mallory III,
right,
who did make it up in '95. Bob Bates, his father was a professor. Some of these people had wealth in their families, but they were from the Ivy League schools. And yet these people come from all over and different circumstances, and they find something that takes them up, and they often become famous for having done first ascents of.
Yeah, I mean, it's there was a period in the early days of mountaineering when it was the sort of young sons of the wealthy who did a lot of the pioneering work, and but that has all changed now. And many of the great climbs are done by people. They could be a professor, or they could be a farm worker. It doesn't matter so much, as long as they can raise the money for the project, and as long as they are skilled themselves, they can tackle almost anything.
Yeah, it's quite amazing to me as a skier that we have millions and millions of skiers in this country, but it's always some poor kid who comes out of nowhere, like Tommy Moe, you know, and Billy Johnson, had very tough lives, often from broken homes, are the ones who emerge. They're not the kids who've been skiing on Aspen and Vail since they were 3 or 4 years old. These kids come out of nowhere and become our gold medal skiers. It's a great thing.
Well, I think they have the determination to succeed. They've always wanted to succeed. They haven't had much help from anyone, but they are determined to succeed, and that drives them on.